Usually when we talk about a check engine light coming on in our car, the instinct is to, well, panic. Or if we're being completely honest with ourselves, we just put a piece of black tape over it, ignore the dashboard, and, just hope the problem magically goes away.
Right, yeah. We want a quick fix. We just want the mechanic to plug in a scanner, reset the computer, and let us get back to our comfortable, quiet commute.
Exactly. But what if the mechanic looks at you and says, hey, that light isn't a warning that something is broken. It's actually the ignition switch for a secondary engine you didn't even know you had.
That completely flips the script. I mean, it changes how we process friction, how we process physical and emotional pain, and ultimately how we view our own limitations.
And that is exactly where we are heading today. Welcome to our deep dive into the first 5 chapters of David Goggins' memoir, Can't Hurt Me. We are looking at a man who survived honestly, a genuinely harrowing childhood.
Oh, absolutely harrowing.
Yeah, and he underwent this impossible physical transformation and endured the absolute crucible of Navy SEAL buds training. So our mission for you today is to unpack Goggins' evolutionary algorithm for obliterating barriers.
Right. We're going to explore how you move past that temporary high of just feeling motivated and actually rewire your brain to harness trauma, pain, and extreme discomfort as your ultimate sources of power.
And we really have to start with a deeply provocative claim Goggins makes right at the beginning of the text. He argues that most of us, regardless of our background or income or education, are only living at about 40% of our true capability.
Only 40%?
Yeah.
It's wild. It makes you look at your own daily fatigue entirely differently. What we often think of as running on empty might not even be halfway through the tank.
Yeah, it's a huge wake-up call. And before we get into the grueling details of his life story, we really have to dismantle the excuses that keep people locked at that 40%.
We do. In the text, Goggins talks about an interaction he had years ago. He was invited to sit on a panel at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology.
Right, MIT.
Exactly. And he's sitting next to this esteemed, tenured MIT professor who has basically dedicated his entire professional life to researching mental toughness.
Okay.
And this professor tells the audience that human beings have hard genetic ceilings. Basically, he claims there is a biological limit where once you hit it, mental toughness simply no longer matters. Biology takes over.
Wow. So he's saying you're just hardwired to stop at a certain point?
Yeah, exactly.
Huh.
But Goggins, who at this point has lived through unimaginable physical and mental extremes, just calls it out as nonsense. He tells the professor, right in front of everyone, that while that biological ceiling might be statistically true for most people, there's always a 1% who are willing to put in the work to completely defy the odds.
He actually references that ancient philosopher, right? Heraclitus.
Yes, he brings up Heraclitus, who observed men on a battlefield and noted that out of 100 men, 80 are just targets, 9 are real fighters, but one is a true warrior.
Okay, let's unpack this, because Goggins insists that our brains are fundamentally wired to seek the comfort zone. He argues that standard motivation, or self-help pep talks, are completely useless because they don't fundamentally rewire the brain.
They don't. They're just surface level.
Right. But I find myself wondering if it's really fair to dismiss motivation entirely, though. I mean, motivation is like a sugar rush. It feels great for a minute, gets you off the couch, but it inevitably crashes. Drive, however, is the actual engine block.
That's a great way to put it.
Isn't it possible that motivation is just the spark, while the drive he's talking about is the actual fuel?
What's fascinating here is the absolute distinction between external and internal forces. Motivation is almost always external. It relies on, good song, an inspiring deep dive,
Yeah.
a pep talk from a coach.
Yeah, somebody else hyping you up.
Exactly. The problem is, when that external stimulus inevitably fades, the comfort-seeking brain takes over again and shuts you down. Goggins' method relies entirely on internal rewiring through deliberate chosen suffering.
So you can't spark an engine with a sugar rush if the engine itself hasn't been built to handle extreme heat and pressure.
Precisely.
Which brings us to how that engine actually gets built. To understand how Goggins built this internal drive, we have to look at his cracked foundation.
Because you cannot fix a profound problem until you brutally acknowledge it.
Right. And his childhood was terrifying. He lived in Buffalo, New York, where his father, Toughness, ran a roller disco called Skateland. To the outside world, they look like the epitome of the American dream.
But behind closed doors, it was a completely different story.
A nightmare. His father ruled the family with extreme physical violence. Goggins talks about hiding dark bruises under his clothes at school.
It's just heartbreaking.
It is. He talks about sleeping on a small office sofa at the roller rink as a 6-year-old, trying to rest while knowing there was a loaded gun hidden under the cushion directly beneath his head.
He was a cyclone of terror. His mother eventually orchestrated a daring escape, smuggling Goggins and his brother away to a small rural town called Brazil, Indiana.
But the escape didn't fix everything, did it?
No, not at all. According to his memoir, the escape only introduced a new kind of hell. And just to be clear for you listening, we are just imparting what he outlines in his book here, not endorsing any of the views of the people he encountered. But the text doesn't shy away from the bleak reality of his new environment, detailing extreme, overt racism.
Yeah, the details are intense.
Very. He recounts having a gun pulled on him by a man in a pickup truck simply for walking down the street. The Ku Klux Klan held marches just 15 minutes from his front door.
Oh my God.
And in school, he found his Spanish workbook defaced with a drawing of a noose and a violently racist threat featuring the N-word.
The psychological toll of that is almost impossible to quantify. To be a kid already fleeing a violent father only to land in a town where the neighbors basically want you dead.
Right. And the physiological result of living in that state of constant fart is what doctors call toxic stress. Toxic stress is like redlining a car engine all day, every day.
Just burning it out.
Exactly. It keeps a child's developing brain flooded with cortisol, permanently locked in a fight-or-flight mode. Over time, that engine starts breaking down.
And for Goggins, this toxic stress manifested physically, didn't it?
It did. He developed a severe stutter. His hair started falling out in large patches. Because his brain was so consumed with basic survival, his memory and language development were severely stunted.
Which led him to just cheat his way through every single grade because he felt completely incapable of retaining information.
Yeah, he was just surviving. He is spiraling. He falls into the at-risk youth demographic perfectly. He's skipping class, hanging out with thugs, completely numb to his future.
Just waiting for the clock to run out.
Exactly. But then, a letter arrives in the mail informing him that he is officially flunking out of high school. He is about to be a dropout.
And that night triggers a massive turning point. He walks into his bathroom, shaves his head and his face clean, and confronts himself in what he calls the accountability mirror.
This part is so powerful.
It really is. He starts getting incredibly raw and cruel with himself, writing his deepest flaws and his daily goals on Post-it notes and sticking them to the glass. Notes that literally said things like, "I'm dumb," or "pull up your pants."
He was systematically stripping away every single excuse he'd ever used to comfort himself.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the accountability mirror isn't one of those soft, smoothing selfie filters we use today to make ourselves look better.
Oh, definitely not.
It is a harsh, buzzing fluorescent light in a public restroom that highlights every single pore, every scar, and every flaw. But wait, isn't this kind of aggressive, negative self-talk psychologically damaging?
Yeah.
Because we are constantly told by modern psychology to be kind to ourselves, to practice self-compassion. Calling yourself dumb seems like a recipe for depression.
It's a very natural reaction to have.
Yeah.
But we have to understand Goggins' intent here. He isn't advocating for passive self-loathing. He is advocating for the absolute abolition of the ego.
The abolition of the ego, okay.
Right. If you are lying to yourself to protect your fragile feelings, you cannot course correct. If you look in the mirror and you are severely overweight, telling yourself you just need to lose a couple of pounds is a protective lie. It keeps you comfortable.
It's a buffer.
Exactly. By acknowledging the raw, unfiltered truth, I am failing, or I am uneducated, you stop hiding behind the trauma. Acknowledging that truth turns those limiting factors into a concrete runway for growth. It isolates the problem so it can be attacked.
And that mirror forced him to get real, which led to the next phase of the algorithm, seeking out extreme discomfort by setting objectively impossible goals.
Right, because once you see the truth, you have to act on it.
So he manages to turn his grades around just enough to graduate and joins the Air Force. He gets this spark of inspiration from reading about a pararescue jumper named Scott Guerin, a guy who miraculously survived a catastrophic parachute failure.
He wants to be just like him.
But when it comes time for the brutal water confidence training, Goggins washes out. He's terrified of the water. Instead of facing the fear, he uses a medical diagnosis of the sickle cell trait, a blood condition that can cause fatigue under stress, as a convenient loophole to avoid the water entirely and quit the program.
And that decision to take the path of least resistance didn't just stall his military career, it infected his entire lifestyle.
How so?
Well, once you give yourself permission to quit once, it becomes a biological habit.
Hmm.
The brain learns that quitting equals safety.
Wow. And within a few years of leaving the Air Force, that habit had physically manifested into him weighing 297 pounds.
Almost 300 pounds.
Yeah. He is working a miserable graveyard shift for an extermination company called Ecolab. He spends his nights spraying cockroaches in industrial kitchens and convenience stores.
There's this incredibly vivid, disgusting scene in the text
Oh, I know the one.
where he's spraying poison under a sink at a 7-Eleven, and a massive nest of roaches literally rains down on his head and shoulders.
Ugh, it's horrifying.
He runs outside in the dark,
Hmm.
throws the dead rats he caught into a dumpster, and a live raccoon lunges at his face. He is at absolute rock bottom.
He's driving home at 4 in the morning, drinking a massive chocolate milkshake, feeling entirely depressed and trapped in his own life. But then he turns on the television and sees a documentary on Navy SEAL Bud's Hell Week.
He watches these incredibly fit men suffering in the freezing surf, carrying heavy logs, and pushing themselves to the brink of human endurance.
And his reaction is so unusual.
It is. While most people would watch that and feel deeply relieved to be on their warm couch, Goggins felt an overwhelming sense of jealousy. He saw men who were driven, not just motivated. He saw men who had mastered their own minds.
So he makes a wild decision. He decides he is going to become a Navy SEAL.
Just like that.
Just like that. He manages to get a meeting with a recruiter named Stephen Shaljo, and Shaljo looks at the Navy weight charts, looks at the 297-pound man sitting in front of him, and delivers a brutal reality check.
Yeah, the math was not in his favor.
Not at all. Goggins has less than 3 months to lose 106 pounds just to qualify to enter the program. Plus, because of his poor education, he has to drastically improve his score on the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, the ASVAB test.
And specifically, in the highly technical mechanical comprehension section, which is no joke.
It is the textbook definition of an impossible task. The physiological stress of losing that much weight, combined with the cognitive load of studying complex mechanics from scratch, it should have broken him.
Completely.
Imagine you're listening to this on your commute right now, feeling completely burned out, and someone tells you that to achieve your ultimate dream, you have to lose 106 pounds in 90 days. It feels like betting your entire life savings on a single roulette spin. It's an all-or-nothing gamble with your body.
But he attacks it. He starts this grueling, sickening routine. Waking up at 4:30 a.m., riding a stationary bike for 2 hours, swimming for 2 hours, doing high-rep circuit training with hundreds of pull-ups and push-ups, then back on the bike for another 2 hours.
It's just nonstop output.
And in between all of that, he is sitting at his kitchen table on absolutely zero physical energy, forcing himself to study mechanical comprehension manuals.
Imagine the sheer panic of plateauing. The text mentions a day where he missed a single pull-up in a massive set.
Oh, this part is crazy.
He drove all the way home, ate his tiny, miserable dinner, and the guilt ate at him so badly that he drove his truck right back to the gym to repeat the entire 3-hour workout.
And we can connect this to the bigger picture. This wasn't just a weight loss journey. Goggins was actively brainwashing himself into craving discomfort.
Craving it.
Yes. By consistently, deliberately choosing the path of most resistance, he was proving to his own nervous system that his physical and mental limitations were largely illusions. They were constructs created by a mind that simply wanted to return to the couch and quit too soon.
And it worked. He eventually drops the weight, scores a 50 on his mechanical comprehension test, and secures his spot in BUDS.
But getting to BUDS was just the physical prerequisite.
Right. To survive the actual crucible of Hell Week, which is 130 hours of continuous physical training, freezing water, and sleep deprivation, he had to invent completely new psychological weapons.
Because your body will inevitably break down. When you're awake for 5.5 days, doing endless calisthenics in the sand and carrying heavy rubber boats on your head, physical fitness is no longer enough.
You're just empty.
Exactly. The muscular system simply cannot store enough glycogen to sustain that. You have to find energy somewhere else.
Hell Week kicks off with literal explosions on the grinder. And there is this terrifying instructor the recruits call Psycho Pete.
Psycho Pete, what a name.
Right. Psycho Pete's entire job is to cull the herd. He wants to break the weak minds as fast as possible so the Navy doesn't waste time on them. He sends the recruits into the freezing Pacific Ocean for what they call surf torture.
Just linking arms as the icy waves crash over their heads in the dead of night.
And Goggins is assigned to Boat Crew 2, and it's essentially a crew of misfits. You have Goggins, you have a guy named Freak Brown who had to overcome his own severe childhood bullying, and you have Chris Kyle, the quiet Texas cowboy who would later become a legendary Navy sniper.
And Psycho Pete is laying into them. He's trying to break their spirit with an endless run on the beach or brutal overhead boat raises where their shoulders and backs are just screaming in agony.
And this is where Goggins initiates a concept he calls taking souls.
This is such a pivotal moment.
It really is. Instead of showing pain, instead of wincing or begging for a break, Goggins and Boat Crew 2 take their 200-pound boat, throw it high up into the air, catch it, and start chanting at the top of their lungs, "You can't hurt Boat Crew 2."
They even stand in the freezing ocean and violently hum the dramatic theme song from the movie Platoon while the waves hit them.
The instructors are absolutely stunned.
They are entirely used to recruits shivering, crying, ringing the bell to quit, and looking for sympathy.
So, what does this all mean? Taking souls isn't about literally destroying someone. It's a mental judo flip.
A judo flick, yeah.
You are taking your opponent's absolute expectation of your failure, and you are using it as the exact fuel to push harder. You are commandeering the real estate in their brain.
This raises an important question. How do you actually find a second wind when your physical tank is registering at 0?
Yeah, how is that physically possible?
Because medically speaking, they had nothing less to give. Goggins found it by taking a tactical advantage in his own mind. When you deliver excellence in the exact moment, your bully, your instructor, or your competitor expects you to break. You tap into an untouchable reserve of energy.
You hijack their negative energy, process it through your own defiance, and convert it into physical output.
Exactly.
But taking souls works incredibly well against external enemies like instructors or bullies. What happens when the enemy is internal? What happens when your own body starts actively breaking down?
That's the real test.
Because in the text, Goggins suffers a fractured kneecap during training. His knee swells up to the size of a grapefruit. And despite this agonizing injury, he has to complete a terrifying underwater knot tying test at the bottom of a 15-foot pool.
And this is not just tying a shoe.
Yo.
This is treading water, which he has to do with essentially one leg because his knee is broken, diving down to the bottom on a single breath, tying a complex knot, and then waiting for an instructor to inspect it before he can finally surface for air.
And the instructor assigned to him in the deep end is, of course, Psycho Pete.
Of course it is.
And Pete is purposely splashing water in Goggins' face when he tries to take his pre-dive breath, delaying the approval of the knots at the bottom of the pool, doing everything in his power to push Goggins to the absolute brink of blacking out underwater.
Goggins is at his breaking point. His lungs are burning, his knee is radiating agonizing pain, and he is staring up at Psycho Pete, who is just smiling through his dive mask, enjoying the suffering.
But right there at the bottom of that pool, running out of oxygen, Goggins has a massive epiphany.
A complete paradigm shift.
He realizes that his horribly abusive childhood in Buffalo, the terrifying racism in Indiana, the toxic stress, the failures, none of it was a curse. It was the ultimate training ground.
He realizes that life had been deliberately callousing his mind for years, preparing him for this exact moment.
Wait, but modern psychology tells us the exact opposite, right? We're constantly told that to heal from trauma, we need to process it, make peace with it, and leave it in the past. Is Goggins seriously suggesting we shouldn't move on?
He's saying something much more radical.
He's saying, go back down into the dark, terrifying basement of your mind, pick up the heaviest, sharpest pieces of your trauma, and literally forge them into armor.
It's a radical approach to pain, for sure. A soft mind tries to sweep failures and abuse under the rug to protect the ego. But a calloused mind actively examines them.
It faces them head on.
Exactly. By accepting his father's darkness, by accepting the racial abuse as part of his own foundational architecture, Goggins stopped running from himself. And physiologically, this acceptance is incredibly powerful.
How so? Like, what actually happens in the body?
Usually panic triggers a chaotic flight response. Your brain screams at you to escape, which amplifies pain to force you to stop whatever you are doing. But by accepting the trauma and leaning into it, Goggins engaged the fight side of the sympathetic nervous system.
Oh, wow.
The brain stops trying to escape and instead floods the body with adrenaline to do battle. That adrenaline acts as a profound natural painkiller.
It's incredible. He stops seeing himself as a victim. He looks at Psycho Pete underwater and he just smiles.
A smile at the bottom of the pool.
Right. He easily finishes the rest of the knots, kicks to the surface, and then, as a punishment, the instructors make him do bear crawls around the concrete pool deck on a broken knee.
And he just does it.
He does it flawlessly, moving like a machine, completely numb to the physical pain. He built an armored mind out of his deepest traumas.
He took the worst things that ever happened to him and weaponized them for his own survival.
So, tying this all together for you listening right now, whether you are dealing with an overbearing boss, a grueling academic program, a toxic relationship, or your own deep-seated personal insecurities, you can apply this evolutionary algorithm to your own life.
It's universally applicable.
It starts by standing in front of the accountability mirror and telling yourself the raw, uncomfortable truth about where you are falling short. Then, you step purposefully into the discomfort zone.
You choose the path of most resistance.
And you look for opportunities to take souls by delivering absolute excellence in the exact moments when everyone else expects you to be mediocre or to quit.
It's a phenomenal blueprint for surviving the wars we wage, both externally and internally. But I want to leave you with a final thought, something that wasn't explicitly answered in these early chapters.
Okay, what is it?
If you successfully callous your mind, if you embrace suffering as a lifestyle, and you build this thick, impenetrable mental armor to survive the brutal war of life, what happens when the war is actually over?
That's a heavy question.
It is. How does the ultimate calloused warrior ever learn to take that heavy armor off and be soft or vulnerable with the people they love?
Wow. That is definitely something to mull over the next time you are staring back at your own reflection in the mirror.
Checking that engine light. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Face your reflection, do the work, and we will